But not as good as they thought.
That's the key recruiter. Have you been in recruitment before? There's chairs there, look.
Yep,
Plenty of chairs there. Take the ones there are.
Okay.
Join the crowd.
I'm thinking we'll probably kick off if you are okay with that. And people will probably arrive and we'll just deal with it as it happens. So, well, I stand up so you can see me, yes. So why don't people stand up because then it's easier for people to see me. So welcome everybody for coming today. Thank you very, very much on this incredibly hot day. The idea of this is that we are discussing specifically the topic of war and the planet. So that includes issues to do with the environment and conflict, obviously. So what will the format of this will be, each of the candidates, who I'll introduce in a minute, and also representation of candidates, will give a 3-minute approximately introduction specifically on this topic. So not just an election manifesto or general speech, but specifically addressing these topics. And then we'll take questions from the audience, because it's all about you questioning. That's the purpose of these debates, that you get as much chance as possible to really ask questions. And then the answers will be around 1.5 minutes each, and then we'll go back to you. Do you feel that your questions have been answered? And if not, then they can give it another go. So that's going to be the format of it. My name is Irish Jordan. I'm an independent moderator, hand on heart. I can say I've voted for most political parties over the years, and I don't know who I'm going to vote for this time. I'm a local teacher, I'm a resident of this constituency, and I believe in freedom of speech. I believe in getting people engaged. I believe in trying to get people motivated and doing things. So that's the purpose of me doing this. Every party has been invited. We have tremendous support from most parties, really. Lee from the Conservative Party has come to most of them, but he's not able to make it tonight, and he sends his sincere apologies. I'll read the statement from him in a moment. Labour Party, we've had this difficulty. I have contacted Fleur on many occasions, and she's basically saying that she didn't really know, it was all very last minute. It's fair that people are busy, I get that, and it's fair that we did organise these, sort of last week, but other candidates have managed to make it, and they've managed to send representation when they couldn't come. The Labour Party's, quite a big party, and they could have. And she also sent an email saying that she only, maybe it didn't come from Fleur, but there was a sort of a thing on the grapevine that she only got 24 hours notice. That's just not true. She got the same notice as everybody else. So unfortunately, she's not represented. But people who are here tonight are, on the far left is Heiko from the Workers' Party. This is just the way they've sat, I'm not really. Then we have Kieran from the Liberal Democrat Party. We've got Peter from Reform UK. And we've got Glyn, who's representing Fergal from the Green Party. Is everybody happy for us to start? Toilets are there?
No, I think you should ask us if we're happy to be photographed by people in the audience.
Okay.
I don't want to be photographed.
Okay.
I'll think it's that in there.
It's a fair point.
Thank you for letting me know. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for bringing that up. Okay. No problem. Fair point. So we will start. So let's start with Glyn, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
3 minutes.
3 minutes, approximately. We'll let him finish his sentence.
Hello,
Stand up so people can see you.
So I'm Fergal. I'm actually Glyn, but I'm up to here representing the Green Party. And most of this is about environment and climate change. So it's a hot day. It's hot here today. It's 52 in Mexico. It's been 52 in India. It's been over 40 degrees for 44 consecutive days, if you can imagine that. So can you imagine what it's going to be like in London when it hits 43 on a fairly regular basis? And that's before heat waves. Flash flooding is likely to become regular occurrence. And the worst scenario is going to be if AMOC turns on. So AMOC is not really a known thing, I don't think, over here. It's the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Current. So that now is predicted with the ice melt from Greenland to be turning off, which is a major catastrophe, I think it's been described as. But that would actually mean that the UK is plunged into freezing rather than being hot, and temperatures going down to -20. So there are many reasons we should be addressing climate change and climate breakdown. There's 3 billion people living outside the climate niche. This means there's an area where people are actually comfortable living. There's about 90% of people live there. As that area expands, there's 3 billion people who are going to be thinking, are we going to move? Or migration, mass migration is inevitable. Food shortages obviously come as well, and mass starvation. So with all these things, a planet hoves into view where you're going to have multi-wars, civil wars lurking around all over the place. If you're interested in these things, economically, GDP is likely to fall by 12% for every 1 degree of temperature rise. To put that in some perspective, the Great Depression was about 29%. So faulty economic policies mean your pension, sadly, is going to be a bit hit because they don't take that into account. The science is crystal clear. The world is dangerously heating. David Attenborough has said already that we are in the sea of great extinction, led by fossil fuel and corporate giants intent on growth. And the byproduct of that is climate change. That's an externality. They say that's not our problem. So both the main parties support growth. We know the causes of climate breakdown. We know there's a huge disinformation campaign by fossil fuel. It's been going on since about 1970s, I should think. 1981. Right, I've got about another 5 minutes of that. Okay,
I'm sure when the questions are asked, these things will come up in the answers.
Okay.
And you'll also have time in your summation speech anyway.
Okay.
So you can always finish up on any points that haven't been covered.
All right, I'll just add that reform is 92% funded by oil and gas. So you wonder why they're climate change denial party.
Absolutely.
Into
nice.
Sorry, who's filming now?
yes, can I ask who's filming?
Perhaps just left the room.
Oh, he's just left.
Two channels called Subject Access, one channel called Subject Access, one channel called...
I don't want to be filmed.
I don't want to
Turn it off.
We have got. We did have quite a lot of cameras.
But too many.
Well, I think that's because we did say on the website, to be fair, that people are welcome to film. And one of the reasons for that, yeah, one of the reasons for that, just to explain to people, one of the reasons we have cameras here is because at one of the hustings, it wasn't allowed to film. And people felt that they were being disenfranchised, not being able to. So we said people are welcome to film. And people have really taken us seriously, as you can see, they're coming in. So apologies if people in the audience feel...
Oh, you'll also post them on the website, right?
Oh, no, sorry, that's a very good point, thank you, Kieran. We're also posting them on our website. So that, and the reason for this is, obviously there aren't a huge amount of people here today, but still, you know, these people have taken their time, which is very precious, and you're obviously very precious. We wanted to go to a wider audience as well. So that's why we're filming it, so we can go on the website and it's there as a legacy. in the spirit of the 1647 Putney debates, not that they had the internet then.
Sorry, who are you?
I think it's only
who are you
Peter that's
filming for?
You don't want to be filmed.
No.
Well-
Who are you filming for?
Lessons for Life YouTube channel, independent journalist.
Right, okay. And that's your son, fine.
You're sure?
Okay, thank you.
Sorry about this. My mic is in the middle and on my field of vision is here. You're on camera at the moment. If you're
That's all right. No,
okay with that?
fine.
Okay, it'll pick up.
Just we like to know who was
Lessons for Life, Julian Morrow. Sorry for the interruption.
May I ask yours first, Steve, a question? In view of the fact it's such a wonderful sunny day, could we not switch the lights off? Yes.
Okay, exactly. Right, so we need let's the light switches are behind the people want the lights on.
It's the light
Peter, you're on.
Right, I'm Peter Hunter, I'm in the day sitting down because I think it's nicer to do that. And so War and Peace, People and the Planet. I grew up, to start with, Malaysia. I was born in Kuala Lumpur, and I think the people and the planet is very important because it boils down to all of the things that actually concern you and the Reform Party. And actually, we are self-funding, we're not funded by oil and gas, so I disagree and don't accept that comment. We can talk about that later, but you've had your say, so keep right from that while I'm speaking, okay? Thank you very much indeed. I think to come down to the points that therefore affect us from the planet and population is that a lot of people are worried about immigration. I think there's good legal immigration, that's a good thing, and I think it's nice to support the Commonwealth because they speak English, they tend to come from African and other countries where they understand our culture and want to buy into it, and so therefore I think there's less need for people to come from Albania and other countries who don't share our philosophies.
Right, Albanian relatives who speak perfect
can
English.
speak
One
speak
second,
after.
we will take questions from the audience later. Let these guys make their opening speeches.
As we don't, I've got to go at 7:30 or just before then because I've got another 2 Hustings to go to. So I will just cover a couple of key points for why you should vote Reform. Now, as has been said when the Labour person has attended, Nigel Farage has agreed that the Labour Party are going to get a thumping majority. So our point, well my point here, you probably don't agree, our point here is that actually you've got a Labour MP, you had one, a Conservative one before, and so therefore really, because there's going to be a thumping majority, you do actually have a much broader choice of your own this time, and therefore you don't have to vote Labour again, and you can definitely therefore vote for Reform. Is that much better? Our tax revenue aspects are very attractive to the normal person in the street and in this room, so we will raise the tax threshold from 12,500 to 20,000, so everybody who's working normally will get an extra 1,340 people per year. If I work for you, I will work to fight crime, I'll work with the police, I'll work on the housing problems which are extensive here in the Putney and the Wandsworth constituency. We will work also to cut waiting times in the NHS, hopefully by improving the management. NHS is very valuable and therefore we will do that. Nobody recently has mentioned your local issue of Wimbledon, so I won't talk about that. We will also attack benefits fraud, and we will hope to work with you and get to know you better, and that's why you should definitely vote for Reform, and happy to take your questions later. I think in the past we've been thinking that you will speak and then you come back with a question,
Absolutely.
which is slightly better.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's
Thank
plenty
you.
of chance to ask questions. Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you. Kieran.
All right, I'm going to stand up. So, hello, my name's Kieran McCarthy. I'm from the Liberal Democrats, and I live in Putney, just down the Richmond Road. And so this is War and Peace and People and the Planet.
Yes.
Lot in there. And then we are, there's a huge number of aspects and policies. So rather than go into all of them right now, I'm sure you'll ask questions. I agree with Peter in that you do have a choice here. And you should choose like they do in Richmond and Twickenham and Kingston and Wimbledon all around us. You should choose Lib Dem, and I'll tell you why on these specific policies why you should choose Liberal Democrat, and that's because we have a much better vision for the future. My argument would be that this country is needs to be looking forward a little bit more and looking back a little bit less. And then if you look at some of the talk some of my concerns about what we've seen in the past and what the Lib Dem solutions are to that. For example, yes, the Conservatives I did think did the right thing and strongly backed Ukraine. How much that was Conservative, how much that was Boris Johnson's personal foibles is another issue. But when it's come to Gaza, I think their policies have been horrific, and the Lib Dem had very clear policies based on our beliefs and our structure, and we can dig into that, what those are. And then Labour has sort of twisted itself in a knot, because it would have conservative policies, but there's so much of the Muslim community in this country are upset, and that's a lot of their voters, that they're sort of trying to find a way through it. The Lib Dems come from a point of principle, and good principle, which I'll be happy to dig into. And then we're going to have a Labour government, we all know it's going to happen. It's just about the size of the majority. And I've started to be reminded about what I didn't like about the Labour government last time around, in that they were a little bit authoritarian, and once they sort of went down a path, that was it. And then in this case, if you remember, there was the Iraq War, which I don't know how you felt about it, but I think pretty much most of the country thought it was a terrible idea before we went into the Iraq War. And if you remember, the Lib Dems were always opposed to it, and that was a very politically risky thing at the time, but it has proven to be right. And there are a bunch of policies that are still strong Lib Dem policies on the basis of how that all happened and how we could basically stop it from happening again, including giving more powers to independent committees, including making sure that the House of Commons has to approve before any wars go into, and so on and so forth. When it comes to 30 seconds, when it comes to green issues, I would say Lib Dems have also got the best policies. I mean, I know the Greens have, this is the Greens thing. I think some of them go a little too far, but I'm mostly aligned with what the Greens say we have to do. And the Lib Dems are also along those lines. And I would point out that Labour, when they were worried about losing votes because they don't want to see that they're spending any money and they don't want to raise any tax, one of the first things they did was they just cut all of these 27 billion on green policies. They just said, well, we're not going to talk about that anymore. So one of the first things they dropped is one of the most important things that we face. So that's why that's my quick summation of why I think we should vote for Lib Dem.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Grace.
My name's Heiko Koo from the Workers' Party. On the starting point of both of these questions of people, of benefit of the planet and wars and so on, I'd like to outline my view of how the society we live in is structured. I believe that we live in a system that we can call capitalism, and capitalism is a system of production of commodities for profit, where labour power is commodified. There was someone here the other day, I see she's here today, she was talking about this the other day. Labour power is a commodity, and it's the key commodity that produces the goose, or is the goose that lays the golden egg. A surplus is produced by paying workers for a period of time, but the cost of the workers is less than what they produce. And that difference is what we call surplus value, or surplus, which is then turned into profits. And the profits are the purpose of production under capitalism. And a huge monopolisation of wealth and power has taken place in the world, whereby 780 companies, this was 2008 statistics, and it's become much worse than that, but I know those stats very, very well. It was an article by Vitali published in the New Scientist, and it said in there 780 companies control 80% of the world economy, and 140 companies within them control 40% of the world. And if you've got 40% of the world economy, you can sway everything in your direction. Now, in fact, it's become much more concentrated than that, particularly during the period 2020 to 2022, during the pandemic, when millions of people were laid off and doing nothing at home. A few tech giants and pharma giants and banks accumulated vast resources, unknown, the biggest transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich, and from people to private corporations in the history of the world. And I believe that war fundamentally is a product of the conflicts between different nations based upon different economic foundations. The different capitalist companies that operate within them push for conflicts between one country and another. I believe that also that the main issues that face humanity are also largely captured by the interests of these major corporations. And so when someone says, this person's financed by them, or that person's financed by them, I don't know the specifics of reform, but in relation to the totality of scientific investigation, and I've got a PhD from King's College from 2018. I've been involved in research and analysis and scholarship and so on for many years. And basically research itself and science itself has been captured by private interests, and they manipulate science to suit their interests. And it is true that they manipulate it on the one side to support, if you like, oil and gas interests, but they also support it to support apparently green interests, which in actual fact, there's a common phrase used nowadays, Greta Thunberg uses it herself, greenwashing. And so I think we need to delve into that a bit to understand where we really are at in relation to the people and the planet. Thanks.
Thank you. Wonderful. I'm going to very quickly, because it's a very short one, read out what Lee Jamie Roberts said, because he couldn't make it tonight. It's very short. All he said was, I'm very concerned that our Labour MP is already behaving as if she has won the Putney election, and we can clearly see her attitude towards accountability. Labour takes Putney for granted and show utter contempt for democracy. Send them a signal and vote her out. Short and sweet. So, without further ado, let's take questions. Who wants to ask a question of any of these candidates?
Right, we're off then.
We're on. Okay, thank you.
Do you want to go first? Yeah, I'd just like to ask you, sorry. I came to the Hustings on Friday, and everything you said, I completely resonated with, okay? My background, my parents were socialist booksellers, so I've kind of been brought up with all kinds of rhetoric. But when you arrive to the point regarding climate, and secondly, something we're not touching upon today, so I won't delve into it if we don't need to, but what happened in the COVID pandemic, I put the brakes on. So what you said now, I completely resonate with the greenwashing of corporations with regards to the climate and the climate emergency, whereas it is a climate emergency. So I would like to hear more from you about that, because the intention that I understood from Friday was that you disagreed that we're in a climate emergency, and that in fact the information we're getting is from scientists who are just spouting rhetoric because they're on the payroll. Okay, that's the impression you gave me on Friday. Okay, what you just said now, you gives the impression that there is a lot of greenwashing, which I do agree with. So in this debate today, I think it would be very important that you clarify where yourself and your party stand on that, because everything else you say, I'm fully behind, but that's where I just put the brakes on when you went into that aspect. And another aspect, I don't want to hog everything, but regarding COVID, I would like to know more about the conspiracy ideas behind it. Once again, I understand that there can be, wherever capitalism is involved, there's a terrible monopoly of information and interest for corporate manoeuvres to make more money. Yes, I know that. But I know hundreds of people through colleagues around the world who have lost loved ones to COVID, okay? And when it was arriving here a month before, my friend in Italy said, 200 people have died in the village next to me. Tell your mum, this is serious, okay? So it's very important to actually be taught raw facts with regards to that. That's not discounting that, yes, capitalism, and yes, pharmaceuticals, and yes, corporations will monopolize and twist any information to their own benefit. But I'd be very interested to know where your organisation stands on that, because the impression I got on Friday was just conspiracy theories, which just undid and feeds into the far-right movement of some which we have here. They present themselves as a very pleasant person, but this is a far-right organisation reform.
Okay,
and
thank you. That is
thank
a great question. Quite long. Thank you.
Is there a way of making that a more generic question?
I'm going to synopsise quickly, and tell me if you're okay with my synopsis. Just for the camera as well, I'll do this. this. So the synopsis is this lady is saying that her background is socialism. She resonates a lot with what you were saying, Michael, in particular. But there were two things that she had an issue with. One is she got the impression from the last Hustings workshop that she was at, which was on Friday, that you are not, that when it comes to climate change, you don't necessarily believe in they had to take the Greens' attitude towards climate change, perhaps. And when it comes to COVID, she was also wondering more about your attitude towards what happened with COVID, seeing that you didn't take COVID as seriously as maybe she feels it should have been. Now, what I'd like to suggest is that we stick to the green question, and if we have time later, we'll go to COVID because we don't have Peter for the entire time. So maybe stick to green and then we'll go back to COVID later if we have time. Are we okay with that? Right, thank you.
It was actually to tie things together, but in any case, the point I'm making is that science is not a neutral force. Science is a force controlled by major corporations, and governments are also controlled by the interests of major corporations. The consequence of that is that when people tell you that they're talking about the science, as we've had a lot of that in the last couple of years, I begin to cringe and I look into it. And when I look into it, I began to discover, and it really began with COVID, that I really began to look into in depth. One, because at the very beginning, sorry to get onto it, but it's unavoidable for the flow of the discussion. Before the crisis hit in Britain, I released a video on behalf of Jeremy Corbyn's filmmakers. And it was a video calling for a lockdown, and that was on the 12th of March 2020. And then it called for Labour Party members to get involved in solidarity work to protect the health service and so on. And I said that what they would do is there'd be massive expenditure, and that would return society towards the type of ideas that Jeremy Corbyn had spoken about only a few months before, when they said it was the theory of a money tree, that you've got plenty of money to spend and that you could spend this money willy-nilly on welfare services. And in some respects, some of the things I said were true. However, only afterwards, I can't answer that question in that time.
What I'll do is I'll give everybody I'll give everybody at least one opportunity to answer the question in a longer fashion.
Yeah.
So it's going to happen, I think. We have more time.
So this led me to enormous skepticism of what is called the scientific consensus. And in economics, which is the thing that affects every single one of us, economic science is possibly the worst science in the world. That's the one that is about human activity. And yet, other sciences, they claim, we have perfect knowledge about. We've got perfect knowledge about the universe, when it was made, how big it is, how many stars there are in it, whether the Big Bang happened. All that apparently we have perfect knowledge of. But every few years, the goalposts are moved and the story changes. I'm old enough to remember television programs being broadcast which forecast an impending ice age. In the 1970s, I remember that was the dominant theme, that there was an impending ice age. Science had decided an ice age was coming. Up until 1975, from 1945, there was a global cooling process, according to Michael Mann. He's the man who invented or developed the theory of the hockey stick. And so I began to look into those questions, and I find that I tend to agree with those people who think that the climate crisis is exaggerated. That does not mean that I'm saying that there are no dramatic changes in climate taking place. There may be. The point being is what you need to do is mitigate for variations in temperature which occur. And no matter which side of the view you come from, there is no way that anything we could do in Britain, anything, even if everybody in Britain died out tomorrow, nothing we could do would make the slightest difference to alterations of the temperature on Earth. Nothing we could do. And therefore I do not think that the interests pushing this agenda are actually interests that correspond with the needs of the people of Britain. I think they are pushing simply agendas that are suiting their corporate needs to accumulate larger and larger profits. So that's the foundation, and that's why I took it up in the way, because the discussion is going to be about this pretty much all evening. So I don't want to deal with everything at once. I want us to deal with bit by bit, and we'll get into it. And I'm sure the Green will disagree and put forward arguments and so on, and we can have a longer and more detailed discussion during the course of the evening. The problem is that discussion does not take place in society. So I'm very pleased that the discussion can take place tonight.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you for your question. We'll come back to you at the end. Absolutely, we'll come back to you. But I want to give everybody opportunity. And we're not going to stick rigidly to the minute and a half if people need more time. Because we're.
What was it? I'm sorry.
Yes, I'll give everybody.
Okay, everybody will get the same if you need it. Okay. So Kieran and then you.
Yeah, so I think you can tie your questions about climate emergency and COVID together in a sense, although I'll focus on climate. And that's because they're both very uncomfortable situations that we face right now in our lives. They're very extreme situations that we've all just lived through and will continue to live through. And it makes people very uncomfortable, obviously, because we're all human beings, we're all alive, to have to realise that there are things outside of your control, outside of our control. There's things that can happen to you that are beyond any of our control on a global level. And yes, it's very uncomfortable facing that reality for a lot of people. And so people try to make sense of that. We're also in a period of the internet where there is the ability, we could do it now, or any of us could go and create a web page and write whatever we think and put it up within 5-10 minutes. And of course we have, there's countless billions of pages and opinions. That doesn't mean that they're right, but it is very easy to go down sort of Alice in Wonderland routes. It's easy to go into silos, especially with the way social media works with algorithms. If you watch one video, it'll feed you another video. It's very similar. And so I entirely understand why people have gone down very specific routes of thought. And if that's all you hear, then you start to believe it because you don't hear the other views. Now, I've been a journalist most of my life. And I was sort of trained to be a journalist, old school journalist, which we don't see that much of these days. And that was about always checking and always being checked and finding out, getting at least two sources and everything, and then digging in and understanding it. And so I've got a lot of skills from that time, which I simply, how I do is I apply to, well, where's this information coming from? Who are the people that are providing it? And yes, I trust experts because I know a bunch of experts. There's a lot of experts that live in Putney, as I've found out when I knock on doors. Experts in sports medicine, experts in child psychology, and they spend their lives learning a hell of a lot about a particular subject. And so when a lot of people that all know a lot about a particular subject get together and say, we need to tell everyone about this, it's really bad, I tend to believe them. And that's where we are with climate, and that's where we were with COVID. And once you've got that number of people, and then once you speak to those people and they can explain everything that they're saying in great detail, and the more you drill in, the more detail they give you, that's people that I trust and believe. And so that's the way I make my decisions. So also, with science, and I this is not entirely true. People tend not to believe in science. They tend to be people that haven't used science that much. So I did study mechanical engineering. I have a master's in mechanical engineering. And the amazing thing, even in mechanical engineering, which isn't the sort of the other sciences, is that you can find by doing simple things like testing materials or using advanced mathematics, you can build stuff which doesn't logically make sense, but absolutely works. So, for example, suspension bridges blew people's minds quite a long time ago now, but it's still remarkable. If you look at some of the materials that go into a Formula One car now, it's absolutely extraordinary. They look like alien objects. And that's because science has enabled people to apply rules, apply tests, to create objects that do the job that you wouldn't normally come up with. So yes, science is exceptionally good at figuring things out. Does it know everything? No, we're constantly battered with new things. And so it works on getting the answers to them. So that's my sort of rundown of my view of why there is a climate emergency. I know there's a climate emergency. I was living in California a few years ago and dealt with the wildfires, and it's real. And COVID did happen. Policies were put in place, different policies made quickly by politicians who didn't really know what they were doing, making very quick decisions, and a lot of them weren't very good. Some of them were. So that's where we were. We've been through a couple of crazy, difficult years, and I understand why people have different views on it, but I say stick with the science.
Thanks, Kieran. Okay, Peter.
And I agree with a lot of what Kieran has said. I agree that there's a climate emergency, and I agree that there is a need for green policies. In the Reform Party, we believe in not going quite as fast as Labour and Conservatives were saying. Labour have now backtracked and cancelled the 29 billion they were going to spend on it in a hurry. For the person in this room, it affects us all if we're forced very hastily to get heat pumps and very expensive new boilers. And even the leader of one of the parties yesterday, she was saying, oh, well, I haven't got my heat pump and boiler yet, but I'm getting one, it's on order. That's too much of a hurry. That's what we say in Reform, because it's going to hit you with extra costs which are unnecessary. Secondly, we say that we've got lots of gas. It's not necessarily a good thing to be digging it out of the ground, but it's all sitting there under the North Sea. And rather than disfiguring the whole of our landscape with ghastly wind farms and things like that, which are not necessarily that efficient, and we can't necessarily use all the power when at the best times of the day, we should be continuing for a while to use the oil and gas in the North Sea and not spending a lot of money on digging it out of the ground in Saudi Arabia and other countries and bringing it here. So, there's a difficult choice to make here, and we think we've got some better choices to make rather than that. And I think that's all I would say on that, because more questions will come up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Glenn.
Yeah, well, there's some interesting points here. I mean, a lot of what our friend over there says, there's a certain amount of truth in it. Science has been captured in some places. It's very clear if you look at food and stuff like that. Corporations will fund science that they want to see the answers. But there's a big difference. What Kieran says is absolutely spot on. You look at it, and you have to look at it individually. Obviously, the consensus on climate is about 100% now. That's any climate science which is published. Now, you may say that it's all being corrupted, but I can literally just point you to this particular graph. So that is not a conspiracy, that is actually real. Everybody actually agrees that this has happened.
I agree.
There's no argument about that. So we have the idea that we know that CO2 is it traps heat. We know that CO2 has gone up and up and up. It's now 420, it's 50% rise. So you would have to tell me why on earth that wouldn't trap heat. That is where we are. Those are facts which everybody agrees on. So the things that you were talking about, which were TV programs in the Ice Age, that's a TV program. That's not science. I remember seeing these things myself. I remember a Radio Times guy saying Ice Age Earth. This was not science. You can go and look up these things. There's a very good website which is skeptical science. All of these things are answered in multiple details, in simple, medium, and difficult science. So I would completely disagree with you that it's a conspiracy. It's not. It's happening. There is a certain amount of greenwashing, corporate-like greenwashing. You can't argue with that. But if we go on to, we're moving too fast, well, that's just not true. Net zero is a scientific target. Your party is the party of delay. You're the party of gas and oil. You are the party who are trying to delay this stuff. And that is exactly the point of science denial, which is exactly where your party sits. You are funded, as I said, and you can look this up as indeed small. It's been a complete expose of funding of the Reform Party. That is, the Reform Party sitting there, it's part of delay. And that is the oil and gas mechanism. That's exactly what is happening. That is what this party represents. As far as I'm concerned, I have small children. This is why I got into this. I have small children. As far as I'm concerned, that party is trying to destroy my children's future.
Rubbish.
Well, it's absolutely true, and it's science.
Trying to save people
It's a
money.
science-based. Oh, sorry, you were interrupting me.
Yeah.
Well, you can come back.
We will give a right to reply.
Yeah.
So we will give you time.
As far as I'm concerned, that is what your party is doing. You have a load of scapegoats and they're called refugees. You're blaming it on everyone, and it's gas and oil, and that's what you are standing for.
Could you tell us what you believe instead of criticising someone else?
Okay, we will take more questions. Okay, so
It's a good question. I think you just slam someone else and I still don't know what you believe in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so what I'd like to do, sorry, it's a bit noisy with the door, but that's fine. People can come and go as they wish. It's a free world. So you will have an opportunity to ask again. Don't worry. So what I want to do at this point is I want to go back to you, but I want to give you a right to reply. Okay, I want to give everyone a right to reply. So, person who asked the question first.
I would just, as I think obviously Liv represented the Green Party, ones with candidate here, all have the opportunity to actually share what is their manifesto, but the candidate was actually responding to a topic that I brought up, and that's what was happening there. But with regards to the gentleman who's representing Nigel Farage's Reform Party, who claimed that there's no funding from fossil fuel companies for the Reform Party, they've actually received 2.3 million fossil fuel interests since 2019. So that's a fact. You can find out anywhere. Anyone can open their phone and find that out to be true. So this gentleman claimed that there's no funding, so that's a mistruth in my book. Did you want me to respond to anything? That's, for me, that was the most important to respond to, that one of the candidates here spoke a mistruth, quite a large one.
What I'm going to do now is give anybody who wants to a 1 minute right to reply. Yeah. So I feel that Peter may. Do you want to reply first because you've?
I think I'll just say a couple of things because I have a lot of sympathy with you. All parties, political parties, need funding. The Labour Party gets a lot of it from trade unions, and that's been a traditional, very good way for them to get money. Unfortunately, it gives the trade unions quite a lot of control over what then goes on. The two parties that have had trouble raising money in this election have been ourselves and also the Conservatives, and it's been noticeable how that has fallen away. We have in the past received money from a number of different sources, and some of it from oil and gas companies as well. So I don't want to stick with that line. We've never had any money from that source.
It's 2.3 billion.
Okay, 2.3 billion. But I wish they were giving some of it to the candidates because we don't see any of that. So there we go. I think I won't say any more.
Okay, thank you.
On that.
Michael?
In the whole last couple of years, I'm sure a lot of you will have posted something on the internet and faced something put underneath says, fact check, not correct, incorrect, slightly inaccurate, and so on. And I've looked at skeptical science, and I've looked at the man, Michael Mann. This is the chart that we showed is a chart from a guy called Michael Mann. He's the person who developed what they call the hockey stick. In other words, that since 1820, that the CO2 levels have been relatively steady, and then they rose dramatically during the period in the run-up to the present era. And then the proposition is that CO2 is a button which you basically, just like a temperature button in the room, if you turn up CO2, the temperature on Earth rises. The parts per million is 420 something according to this figure. I'm not disputing that the parts per million are that. I'm saying that that does not, firstly, that CO2 is not the cause of warming. That's the first proposition I'm going to make. I'm arguing instead that CO2 rises with warming. Now, on Skeptical Science, they don't deny that, because I've gone on there, I've looked at all three levels of the discussion on that. They don't deny that CO2 is caused by warming. What they say is it's a self-reinforcing process. So once the temperature on Earth rises, CO2 rises, because most CO2 is in the ocean, and most of the planet is ocean, and so that causes a release of CO2, and then that is reinforced and exacerbated by man's activity. The problem with that argument is, right up until the 1930s, the level of CO2 rise was insignificant. And right from the period 1945 to 1975, when there really was a big industrialization process, there was no rise in temperature. In fact, temperature fell during that period. And therefore, the evidence does not back up a direct correlation between the rise in CO2 and the rise in temperatures. I'm not saying there isn't any rise in temperature, nor am I not saying that there's no rise in CO2. I'm saying they are exaggerating and over-egging the relationship between man's activity and CO2 emissions. Solar flares play a key role in the temperature on Earth. The sun governs the temperature on Earth, not man's activity. That's the argument that I'm making. That doesn't mean, one final point, that doesn't mean that human beings don't affect the temperature by their activities, particularly with the process of concretization and industrialization. My father was born in Malaysia, he's Chinese Malaysian. When I was a kid, we went to Malaysia, it was a jungle land, it was flora and fauna everywhere. Now, because they've industrialized it, it's a concrete jungle and the temperatures are extraordinary. And there's a constant cloud over the country because they burn fires in Indonesia for rubber plantations. But that's a man-made product relating to specific environmental conditions. It's not about CO2. It's about how we deal with our relationship to nature. That's a different issue.
Thank you. I'm trying not to cut people off because it's so engaging. I'm sort of looking at the audience and seeing how engaged you are. So please, I want to be fair to everybody. So I won't be cutting anybody.
You've got a bit of tea with an
As soon as people roll their eyes, I'll stop.
Yeah, exactly. And if I feel you're really boring the pants off them, and then it's going to, I'll stop.
I'm really worried. I am genuinely worried that because of our political process that we're not going to deal with the reality of climate change, and we're not dealing with it on a global level. And we've got the Labour Party will be the government scaling back from their green plans. We've had the Conservative government preventing wind farms and solar farms because they don't like the look of them. I mean, it's terrifying that we're not moving forward. This is coming, and we all know it's coming. That's the thing. We know this is getting really bad, and year after year after year it gets worse, and we all know it, and we're not doing what we need to do. So I worry about it. I do love the fact we've got all the views here. I think this is great, and I love the fact we have a democracy, but it worries me, I'll be honest with you. In terms of what the pragmatics of what we can do as individuals, yes, heat pumps are expensive, so what do? You do is what we've done millions of times before. You make it cheaper for people, and the technology will get cheaper, and then it will just take over. Is it better for the environment? Yes. Does it run cheaper? Yes. Will it ultimately be better for everybody? Yes. Let's just do it. Likewise, electric cars, and if you've been in a modern electric car, they're better than the old cars. They accelerate faster, they brake faster, they're more comfortable, and do they help save the planet a bit? Yes, they do. Issue with the batteries getting better. There's a whole bunch of policies. The Lib Dems will provide free insulation and heat pumps for the poorest, because those are the people that can't afford to do it, and then we'll have tail down subsidies for everybody else. I've got solar panels on my house in California. I live in California, and literally the next day I saved money. It was ridiculous. They turned them on and I was paying less. I was saving money from day one, and it was coming from solar, and I'm in the process. Oh, it was like $160 a month, and it went down to $95 a month. I mean, just it halved, almost halved, like overnight. And I was using the sun, so we should just all do this. I'm in the process of buying a house in Thamesfield, one of the first things that I can do as soon as I can afford it is going to stick solar panels on that thing and get a heat pump in. And if the government can help everybody with that, that's a really good thing for everybody. On the global scale, I really wish people would only vote for people that make a strong point about this, because that's how things work. The reason these conversations don't happen at a global level is lots of political representatives have people voting them in, and they're not voting for just the people that will say, yes, we will fix this. If no politician got in that didn't say we really need to fix climate change, my God, they would all change their tune within a day. You know that. I mean, they'd have reform, we'd say, yes, heat pumps for everybody, if they thought they could get an MP in. We all know this to be true. So we need to get to the point. Don't vote for anybody that doesn't take this issue seriously. Just don't vote for them, and watch within 2 years they will all change their tune. And then we can progress a little bit with the world.
Thank
That's
you,
my
Kieran.
response/rant. There you go.
Okay. Do you want to say anything, Dan?
Well, I mean, I don't really want to carry on having the argument about CO2 and something. All of this stuff has been done decades ago. I mean, Michael Mann, all the stuff you're saying, it's all been answered. Sunspot, all of this, it's all been answered. You know, I don't think we need to be having this conversation. I just think you're wrong. And I went through exactly the same process. I went through, so when I found out this, which you're all saying isn't so, I went through the exact same thing, and I looked at all the science. And I checked it out, thinking, there's a lot of disinformation. There's the global warming policy front, one of the supporters of reform, and they're a disinformation group. So all of these I went through, and you think, who is reliable, who isn't reliable, what are your sources? I mean, I would go back absolutely to what are the sources. When you sort of arrive at the point of thinking, okay, this is a reliable source, then I think it behoves you to actually go with that. You know, and that is the science. Now, there is also a consilience. So for climate change, that is much more powerful than just the consensus, which, as I said, is at 100%. So the consilience is actually many, many different strands from multiple fields, and they all point at the same thing. One of the first things that actually happened, one of the first examples was when they were looking for egg timing. And it was back in the 90s, and they had all these records from about 200 years, and what happens is they were trying to put it from bits of card and stuff, and they were sort of digitising it. And the people who were doing it said, well, this actually must be all wrong, because the times that birds are nesting has moved over 2 centuries. And this is, this is before, this is all amateur science all over the place. So this bit of science, that was one of the first bits of proof of climate change affecting nature. Now, that's not, there are literally thousands of these. I think the last time I looked, there was something like 26,000 different threads, all pointing at climate change. So I don't think you can actually argue with that. You know, the evidence is so overwhelming in so many different places. I think it's just a ridiculous argument. So I think you and Reform actually arguing the same thing is a bit odd. I mean, I was watching George Galloway doing his speech, and it could have been Reform. I mean, it was a bit bizarre, to be honest. But for the Green Party, you know, we obviously not doing that. So I have noted down some of the policies in answer to you, which would be they're obviously all on the website, and they're quite nicely laid out. So it's I don't really want to go through just the figures and stuff. That's why I'm just blathering on. But one of the really good ones is to remove all oil and gas subsidies. So in the world, it's a huge business. There's the IMF said that oil and gas subsidies are 7.3 trillion per year, per annum. So of course, why would people want, you can see vested interests all over the place in that. 7.3 trillion a year, that's a massive sum. So to remove that, and then you've got that money and you can release it onto things like renewables. So
Can I stop you for 1 sec?
Sorry.
Because I feel like I've spoken for quite a long time. You're sort of starting to answer another question.
Okay.
But yeah, so
All
thank
right,
you.
so, yeah.
Thank you. First.
Yes, I'm Diane McCann, local campaigner on water and sewage, that area. I have a question, a comment, and perhaps a question on the fact that I think we've established that climate change is definitely a thing. It's happening. We can see it ourselves. It's hotter. It's wetter. Where are the insects?
Where the bees?
Where's the bees? Exactly. The thing is, what it's causing is catastrophic damage to our environment. Many, many different parts of our environment. So we've got plastic polluting our rivers, seas and waterways, microplastics floating in the air in Putney High Street from air pollution, which I've also campaigned on for many years. We've got plastic in our blood, in our brains, in babies, in mothers' uteri. It's horrendous. So all of these things, the effects that it's having on many, many areas of our environment, because of our demand for farmed meat, we've got industrial farming on a huge scale. We're basically growing most of the food for industrial farmed animals, a large proportion, I can't remember what the percentage is now, but probably about half of the land in this country is used for growing grain to feed animals for us to eat. Now that's a very bad use of land. There's just so many incidents of where our environment is being damaged. So it's not just a climate emergency, it's a climate and ecological emergency.
So question?
And a pollution emergency. So I believe that it's our consumer way of life that's causing. We have to consume less. Yes, I agree with green energy, renewables. We obviously have to go down that route. But we have to go back to a simpler life. We have to go back to the life that my parents lived. And I lived as a child. I'm 71. And, it wasn't hard. We all have got too much stuff. And we all want too much stuff. We want to eat food out of season. We want to buy a new car. And by the way, electric cars, yes, they're great, but they do cause pollution. A huge amount of resources built into them. It takes like 10 years for an SUV, electric SUV, to get into credit in terms of emissions. We have to all accept we can't all drive private cars in cities. We have to have a monumental change in the way we live. Otherwise, we're going to die.
So,
we really are.
It's been a fantastic amount of information you've given there. I'm kind of struggling to summarise it for a question.
Read it
So
out.
basically,
whether the candidates agree with me.
Yeah, okay. Let's start this time with Peter. Do you want to start? 'Cause I think you've got to go soon, don't you?
No, you start. You're happy to answer.
Okay.
I will if you like.
Yeah, I'm just aware of the time. Which thing you have to
No,
go?
well, I'll stay
You're okay?
behind the
Perfect.
hand,
Okay.
it's fine.
Right, so,
Thank you.
Important stuff.
yes, thank you, Diane. I think you are correct.
Just to be fair, let's see how long people are taking, and we'll just.
Go on.
Because we don't want to go on
Let's
too
pick
long.
it up. Let's get into Hustings mode.
Yes, get Hustings mode.
60 seconds, go.
See if you can do it in a minute and a half.
Okay, good. So yes, you're correct with all those things. These recent reports about microplastics in the blood, a little bit, massively disturbing, let's be honest.
And forever chemicals, which I didn't
And
know.
chemicals, and industrial farming, the runoff into our rivers. I mean, we are going the wrong direction.
And water is unsafe to drink.
Yeah, but we could talk sewage. This is a Lib Dem thing. We can talk all night about sewage and what we do about sewage. Just trust me, the Lib Dem's got a plan for sewage and the other ones don't. I don't think we need to go back, I think we need to go forward. And I do think that we are getting there, and the next generation, like my two daughters, view things very differently. They just view things totally differently, and they approach the world totally differently. And they don't have this consumerist drive that you're talking about, which got us into a lot of problems. And then, of course, there was a great meme probably a couple of years ago now, about how our grandparents lived and how our parents lived, and when they were my age, and how we would just reuse things. And that's happening in the younger generation. Oh, if you look on the high street, there's, I forget the name of it, whether you go and you get the grains and you get
Yeah, the sauce.
sauce. So that's the way people are moving. It's happening. And then what you need the policies to encourage the good things and limit the bad things. And I would argue, but we don't have time, I could literally walk through a list of all the ways that the Lib Dems have got, right, well, we need to do this and this and this and this and this, and we need to stop this, this, this and this and this. And that's what needs to happen. That's what a government does. So
Okay.
I agree with you.
Thank you. Peter?
In many ways, I agree with everything he says and also the worries you express. And actually, I think the problem with having a very, very strong, I return to my original supposition, which is the problem with having a very strong Labour government in, is that they will do a whole lot of things that many of us, many of you, will not agree with. And they will raise taxes, they will tax any property, right or right not owned.
I agree with raising taxes.
We've got policies that you agree with raising
Yes, I
taxes.
do. The richest have to pay for it.
Well, yes, but I think the trouble is that they increase it across the board, and we're suggesting we will reduce it for the lowest income earners. So, the different parties have different solutions. And the last thing I would say is that if you put a very big majority into Parliament, there will be no control over what they do. And I personally am do not agree with the plans that he's hardly admitted to, Star. He's hardly said anything because he's pretty left, and I disagree with the far right party. He's very
really
left,
funny.
and we are not a far right party. I'm a conservative, but I'm much to the right of where the Conservatives are. They've drifted to the centre left, and that's a mistake. And I can see I've pricked a lot of balloons there.
Conservatives have drifted to the centre left.
Let other people speak.
Is that what you just said?
Right.
We can come back. This person asked a question, we need to address that question. Thank you very much. Okay, so Peter, have you finished?
I have.
You have, okay. Liz?
I agree completely with that. I mean, one of the things that's actually driving this is endless growth. I mean, that is the thing that I said earlier, is growth. Everyone says you have to grow. You can't have infinite growth on a finite planet. It just doesn't work. Really, economists know this. All political parties know this. And yet we still talk about this endless growth. And it's just not sustainable. I mean, if you could decouple growth and economic growth and resources, then fine, you can't. I mean, it just doesn't happen. So all this growth is actually unsustainable, and a lot of that feeds into cost of living. So I think in the Green Party we actually have a wealth tax, which we're proposing, which has been very popular. I mean, it's not actually on every single person. It's those on the highest amount of wealth. So it's a wealth tax. So it's those who have over £10 million pounds will pay 1%. Those with £1 billion, I think it was, will pay 2%, which seems incredibly reasonable, and it's actually dragging inequality very slightly back to the norms, which I think the Tories have put up. They've given tax breaks tax breaks to the rich. I think we know that.
All right, thank you. Heiko?
I find it very unfortunate that the Green candidate is not prepared to discuss what is science, because science is not about consensus and never can be. Science can never be settled. Science, by definition, is a question of questioning, challenging, whether your original. Do you mind? I'm trying to answer. Is science is about the ability of human beings to question what they are told, and if you are unable to question what you're told, you are entering deadly and dangerous territory. And I put it to you, that's why I raised the question at the other meeting about COVID, at the other meetings about COVID, I put it to you that we have been taken down a dangerous and horrific route in the last few years. It started out with a story which I wrongly supported, and I've admitted I was wrong on that. You may not agree, you may think I was right on that originally. But it started out with a COVID story, that we were facing a deadly pandemic. One of my friends died, possibly, or they said, from COVID, and it may well have been from COVID. But I also know people who have died as a result of the vaccinations which happened afterwards. And for example, it's just come out in the news, a serious report by Reuters a couple of days ago, that the United States of America Defense Department ran a global campaign arguing for an anti-vax program. They promoted anti-vax policies, they promoted the negation of masks in the Philippines, in Indonesia and other countries around the world, just made the news the last few days, where they were taking the Chinese vaccine in order to promote the mRNA vaccines and the viral vector vaccines being promoted in the West. And I was horrified that the Greens and their allies across the world were promoting the idea that mRNA vaccines, which are a type of gene therapy, that even though they opposed GMO foods, they were promoting mRNA vaccines, which, according to the latest data published in the British Medical Journal on the 4th of June this month, they published an article saying that there are 3 million excess deaths in the 47 most developed countries in the world, and they are inexplicable according to COVID. In other words, they are caused by something else. Now, you're talking about correlation between CO2 and climate. Where's the correlation being drawn by the main political parties and by the Green Party about the relationship between the vaccines and the excess deaths? Andrew Bridgen and many other people have pointed this. John Campbell, who many of you will have followed during the pandemic, look at what he's saying now about this. He's been adamant for a year and a half that there is a direct correlation between this and the vaccination campaign. So you can start out with a good idea, science is defending humanity, and then end up with a society driven by division, by 2 meters distances, by masks, by vaccinations, with experimental vaccines which can injure, harm and maim on a scale unknown in history. So I do not believe you should ever accept that science is settled. Science is about questioning and challenging.
Just one second. No, sorry. Peter, you've got to go soon. So I'm going to give you just some time to wrap up.
A lot of very good stuff has been said. I'm only going to speak for a minute just to say I'm grateful to you all for coming along. We heard a lot of diverse and great views. I've listened to what you've said. I stand by my original thing, don't vote for Labour, and she's not here anyway because she can't be bothered to come. So vote for somebody different. I hope it'll be for me or for the other good-looking guy, which is this one. It seems to make a lot of sense. I don't agree with a lot of your sides or yours, but that's the nature of democracy. The reform, I'm going to 2 other hustings tonight, so Sergeant shouted at there as well, so I'm not going home to have a coffee and watch the football, which we're terrible at anyway. But thank you very much for listening, and good luck. And do vote, because a lot of people don't bother to vote, so make sure you use your vote, whoever you vote for. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you. I want to go back to the person who asked the question, which was this lovely lady here. So, do you feel the question was answered? Do you want to make a comment?
Well, no, I mean, this person here, I missed what party he's from. He didn't address what I said.
Workers' Party.
I didn't feel that your part, what you just said was a response in any way to my question about the environmental emergency, the environmental crisis, which is largely driven by the climate crisis, whether that is in turn driven by our consumer way of life. And do you agree with me that we need to change? We need to live a simpler way of life. Let's just agree to disagree about the science, because I think you're wrong. I believe you're wrong. I believe the science, your science. But nevertheless, the knock-on effect of the climate crisis, of global heating, whatever is causing it, is causing all these effects on our environment. Whether it's the insects dying, bird life dying, many species have been lost. There are only 4% of wild animals left on the planet in terms of vertebrate body mass.
So can I summarise that? Basically what you're saying is we need to go back to a simpler way of life. that we have all of these issues going on in the world,
Yeah.
and you feel that particular point wasn't addressed.
Yes. If you look at the big picture, you realise, any thinking person realises we have to change.
Okay, so can I just give people a very, very quick round of reply on that one if you feel it wasn't covered? Was it generally not covered, or?
No.
Okay, so Heiko, do you want to pick?
In relation to pollution, pollution is one thing. The sewage problem has got nothing to do with climate change. I'm sorry, it's just not connected. Now, the pollution problem is about corporations. Corporations robbing us and pouring poison into the water. That's what it's about. Now, in relation to...
Well, what about the pollution?
Just give it a chance to answer, because you've had your chance to do it and ask again. Yeah.
My expertise is China. I did a PhD on Chinese political economy. China's economy is in constant growth for the last 40 years, and it's the fastest rate of growth in human history. And they've raised people out of poverty. And they've also carried out two sides. One side, they've carried out the greatest emissions program in the world, so they've massively emitted CO2 and industrial products and so on. They've also carried out green policies in the biggest scale of any country in the world. So there's a contradiction here between the theories of the Greens. They produce cars in China, BYD produces cars, produce electric cars, some of which go further than the electric cars were being sold here, and they cost a third or fourth of the price. About $6,000 now you can buy a Chinese electric car, but they're being refused access to the marketplace. And we're being told to get rid of the existing cars we've got and replace them with extremely expensive cars that are at the cost of children in the Congo being exploited to death at 7 and 8 years of age. I don't believe that the green policies that are being carried out in the Western countries in the name of net zero have anything to do even with the objectives which they claim to be. I don't believe they're doing anything to do. I believe they're in a competition economically with China, and they're trying to use that as the excuse for promoting green policy. I go back to the first point I made. Nothing we can do in Britain will make the slightest difference to CO2 emissions in the world that could affect climate, even according to the theory of the hockey stick. Absolutely nothing we can do. So you can actually forget about that and then ask yourself, what can we really do to make the air cleaner? We can put catalytic converters on every car. Instead of the idea of getting rid of all the cars and bringing in new cars with a massive expansion in the use of industrial resources, that is the consequence of that. For example, Sadiq's Khan policy in relation to ULEZ and this sort of thing, scrapping cars. And all they've done is now they're sending those cars to the Ukraine. So it doesn't make any difference whatsoever. All it does is try to promote industries in Britain. And that's where the greenwashing comes in from major corporations who are pushing an agenda that actually has nothing whatsoever even to do with these theories of CO2. It's got nothing to do with it. It's a corporate fraud. That's my argument.
Okay, thank you. So
But
you
if you
felt
stop buying from China,
Right.
we're contributing to China's emissions by buying. We've just simply offshored our emissions. We also have the historical responsibility because we essentially, the Industrial Revolution started in this country. We invented the steam engine, the coal-fired steam engine, and we had this empire that went all over the world and raped and pillaged and plundered to get resources, to ship them back here, to promote the industry.
Just one tiny point of response. I'm terribly sorry.
I want to give you guys a chance as well.
6 billion people a year die because they burn solid fuels in a simple fashion in Africa and India. In other words, they live in a house where they burn wood, right? And they die from the smoke. That's the simple life. When I was a child, we had coal in our flat, in our house. We used to burn
That's
coal.
not the simple life that she's talking about. You're
that is a simple
simplifying
life.
things. You're bashing us over the head
I'm not
with
bashing you.
very easy, dramatic, dominant facts that kind of dazzle us. But in fact, if you unpick things and actually discuss them carefully, methodically, a lot of what you're saying can be undone. A lot of what you're saying I support, but the way it's being delivered and the Piers Corbyn, who's very much behind what your party is, there's a lot of so much disinformation.
Sorry, can I just say? Sorry, one sec. Can I just? Sorry.
It's not actually in the response.
One sec. Listen for a second. I'm slightly concerned that what's happening here is that all the debate is coming from this corner. There are other people here, and it's not fair. I want to give everybody here a chance to answer everything, and I'm really doing my best to be fair. Please tell me if you feel I'm not at any point.
No, yeah.
I'm really trying to be, but I want to be fair to the audience to get a chance, but I want to be fair to everybody in the audience. And I feel that everybody's had a chance to answer questions. So, should I move on?
This lady wants to know more. This lady sitting here wanted to know earlier on. She made a request to know more about what the Green Party manifesto is and what you actually stand for. So I think it's very important to know that, for example.
I would like to ask Kieran something.
Sure.
So I understand that you said you put in solar panels.
Yeah.
On day one you realised you were making a saving. You didn't say anything about the energy used in China to make the solar panels.
Sure.
Nothing about the transport, nothing about the building, not anything. All you looked at was you saved $1 a day or something. But the environment is much more than what you saved in one day. If we don't have manufacturing here, we just export it somewhere else. It's not improving the world, it's just making perhaps us feel a bit better.
Okay, thank you very much for your question. So, Kieran, you answer.
Fair comment. Sure. They weren't made in China, I checked, but let's be honest, the particular panels on my roof, I can't remember they weren't Chinese, I checked. But yes, China is producing the cheapest solar panels in the world right now. I would view that as a good thing. It will encourage people. The more people that do that, the more we will want to build
What would
them.
you see as a good thing?
Well, because
No, what would you see as a good thing?
solar panels are a good thing. Now, yes, there is always issues around manufacturing, but there's always been issues around any form of manufacturing on a massive global scale. The fact that China has, and the reason it's cheaper, apart from occasional state subsidies, is that they're producing in much greater quantities because there is much more demand, and that is leading to improvements in technology, which is making it cheaper. And it's the same with every product that's ever been made. So cheaper solar panels equals good thing, and if a lot of people want them, then what this government should do is get behind some of the technology that we have. We have some of the very best research technologies in the world, and they're dotted all around, so there's a lot of them in London. And what we need to do as a government is start pushing those people and taking their painted ideas rather than taking them to China or taking them to the US. Then we need to build them up in the UK and come up with cheaper panels ourselves. I'd be all behind that. That's an industrial policy which I'm completely behind. Solar panels are great. Wind farms are incredible. If the wind blows and these things sit there and they produce electricity, and so we don't burn this stuff, which is causing major problems across the planet. I will point out on a policy issue, it was only the Lib Dems in power that got any of those wind farms up at all. And as soon as they were out of the coalition, it was shut down again, and those rules are still in place thanks to the Conservatives. I'm hoping in 2 weeks' time, we'll all be like, let's get rid of these crazy rules, and let's get some wind farms up, and let's get some solar panels up. It also saved us a fortune when we had the whole issue with Russia and Ukraine. We had to buy less, we still had to buy a lot of gas. We had to buy less gas because we had so much coming in wind power. If we'd had gone the route that Ed Davey was the guy that was pushing it, we'd have had, I think it was like 10 to 15 times the amount of wind power, and it would be in place, and in place for 50 years. We wouldn't be using up, and then we'd all have cheaper bills. So, it's local and it's national and it's global. So, yes, we talk a lot about saving money, and why do we do that? Because we're just talking at the global level all the time.
May I come back? I
Yeah.
take your point, but I just think it's meaningless, quite honestly, to say that on day one you personally save some money. That is not looking at it from a world.
That is a fair challenge, and why do I say that? Because I'm trying to encourage people to do it, basically.
May I ask another question?
Very quickly, yep.
As I understand it, every windmill
Yeah.
uses 1,000 tons of steel. At the moment, they've got this big dispute about whether to have a coking coal line in India. If we don't, all that happens is the Chinese are making 1,000 tons of steel per windmill. That's not green.
So yes, but here's the thing, 1,000 tons of steel is nothing compared to what goes on every single day, building every single thing that goes on in the world. Yes, 1,000 tons of steel seems like a lot to us because, frankly, we've never used 1 ton of steel. If you're in the building trade, if you say to us, you say, oh, I'm going to go and lug 40 bits of wood to do up my extension, that's a lot for you. For the building trade, they would laugh. They say, well, we need 1,000 times that tomorrow for this one thing we're doing here. So 1,000 tons steel sounds a lot, but in the bigger scheme of things, how the world works, it's minuscule, and that stuff will last.
There isn't only one mill, you have 250 per
But it will
year.
last for 50 years, providing clean energy.
No, a windmill that has a shelf life of 15 years instead of
It depends which model you're talking about. I love that we're digging into it.
I know, and that's the purpose. I'm loath I'm loath to stop it, but I'm just aware that we need to let other people talk as well. And it's become a little bit of a to and fro. So, do you mind if I move on to let Glyn respond and then?
Yeah, no, there's all good points, and I absolutely take your point in building terms. It's minuscule, but there are other ways. They're actually looking at wooden wind turbines, and that's quite an interesting new way of doing it. Whether that's green or how that works, I think it's still, you're probably better off placed than me to, but you're not allowed to speak. So there are a few things. He says there's nothing that we can do. Now, having worked on COP, that is exactly the point. That there are actions which are national, local, international, and that they all make a difference. So in the COP scheme, people say the climate deniers and basically, oh, there's nothing we can do. Well, in every country, there's 194 countries. My daughter would tell me off if I get it wrong, but I think it's 194. And of course, everyone has a climate. So why on earth would we be 1%? We actually are more than 1% because we have climate finance, which is a very large area. So in those sense, it's everyone coming together. I mean, that really is the thing. So I think in COP, talking about net zero and stuff like that, there's 145 of those countries agreed to go to net zero. Now, the speeds are slightly different because countries are economically different. So India, I think, has decided that they're going to do 2070. Countries which are more developed like ours, we should be going faster because we don't need to do, a lot of the infrastructure is already here. And as Diane said, we've been polluting longest. CO2 stays in the atmosphere essentially forever. For our purposes, it's cumulative. So there is all that sort of stuff going on all around the world, and it's fascinating. Christiane Figueres has been talking about this quite a lot recently, and she's sort of quite excited. If you ever look at optimism and outrage, it's a really in-depth look at all of this stuff. It's a great podcast, which I recommend to everybody. Outrage and optimism. So there was another thing that you also said about consensus, and you were disappointed about that. But consensus is essentially where scientists bat it to and fro, until they reach a consensus. And that's what it is. Obviously, it can be overturned if someone comes up and says, it's not this after all, and after peer review and all that process, they decide, yeah, okay, it's not. I mean, I think it'd be great if they could think of something else. But, there's the oil and gas companies who've been denied this, and they, behind the scenes, they all know that it's true. They've known it since Exxon's own science in 1981, and they proved it. They had all the world's best climate scientists. So the consensus is actually really important because it's what the people who really know the stuff, have actually decided. And that can be tipped. You know, you're right, no science is settled. This has been settled for a long time. If someone comes up with a different solution, yeah, sure, it changes. We change with the science. So that's a really good point. On EVs, I think there's a serious problem on that. There's a Professor Michaud from Queensland University who did the first global stock take of what it would take to come up with all these EVs. And the amount of resources that we need, it's not even close. So for all the governments and what they're saying on net zero, it's not close. The resources are out by orders of magnitude.
Sorry, what do you mean resources?
Resources is actually the metals which are actually needed. So the copper, nickel, all those things, exactly where they're coming from. So that was the first time, and that's a huge sort of wake-up call for us, because we're saying that we can all do this, we can all swap to EVs, and we simply can't. There are not enough resources. He went through it in great detail, saying, well, we could perhaps, we can find copper somewhere else. And he looked at that, and how many copper mines would we need? Well, we'd need about 100,000 extra copper mines. So all these things are massive. So in a sense, we have this thing that we can't change to EVs. So we do have to go back to a simple life. We do have to actually provide transport for us. And in the city, we're really well placed to deal with this. So one of our policies is quite ambitious, and it's actually getting rid of cars by 2030. That's internal combustion engines. But we kind of need to address all this stuff. So this comes back to Hammersmith Bridge as well. So people want to everyone wants to open Hammersmith Bridge. It's open.
I'm beginning to feel we might need to let Heiko have a go on this question, because it's been quite a while.
That's fine.
Are we okay to give someone else a go? Heiko. Thank you.
No, sorry.
I just, yeah, trying to be fair.
The 20th century was governed by a conflict between the planned economy of the Soviet Union and the Western capitalist world. Throughout that period, the claim was that we are a superior system and that therefore we require nuclear weapons and preparation for nuclear war and the global destruction of humanity in order to defeat the Soviet Union. And that was an ideological and a systemic clash between the two societies. I put it to you that behind the arguments that are being given by the international agencies and the main institutions and governments of the Western world is a clash with China, and that is being revealed by what we've seen in relation to the war in Russia, the war in Ukraine and Russia. But it's also, the flip side of that is also that the supposed democratic facade of our mission-based system that is superior to the rest of the world is being revealed in what's happening in Gaza. And so, I put it in Gaza, in Israel, in Palestine. So, I put it to you that there are major corporations linked in with the United Nations, linked in with the climate lobby promoting the idea of net zero, who are trying to promote what they call, or are promoting what they call, the fourth industrial revolution. The fourth industrial revolution involves the integration of machinery, high-tech communications, and man. And it means that the largest corporations are seeking a massive subsidy drawn out of your pension funds to finance this project in the name that fourth industrial revolution will allow machinery to replace man as the agency of protecting the environment. And so they have all these, the drones and the 5G and the mechanization of human relations, the abolition of cash, the digitization of everything, the monitoring and control of humanity through digitization and artificial intelligence. And this program, promoted by the leading governments in the world, is a program that I put to you is to the detriment of the entire human species and threatens nuclear and military annihilation of large swathes of the population and conflict with China. over resources and power. The displacement of industrial operations in the West is all that is happening. There is no green agenda in the world, as the lady correctly pointed out. All there is an industrial displacement towards India and China, and now also towards Africa. And that industrial displacement has not resulted in any decline in the growth rate. On the contrary, the growth rate in Africa and China is at the core of what's taking place. Now, how that growth takes place, how development takes place, is important. That's important for the ambient and environment that people live in. It means that corporations like the Thames Water should ensure that they don't pollute the waters. I mean, I remember when they cleaned up the Thames. When I was a kid, we went swimming in the Thames with my neighbour, and we came up coughing with pollution, basically. We were coughing and sick for weeks. Now, they did clean the Thames. Remember, they found salmon in the Thames, they had trout in the Thames, and now they polluted it again. That's not a technical question. That's not because of climate change. It's because the companies have raped our economy, raped the public sector in order to do whatever they can to make the maximum profit by plundering the economy. And that's basically behind what's going on. And that's going on in the name of green technology, in the name of protection of the environment. They're doing that now. And nowadays you've got artificial intelligence. The kids are using artificial intelligence.
That's privatisation has caused that.
Yes, but there's a double-edged sword.
It's not the name of green economy, it's privatisation.
Well, but they are also doing that in the name of the green economy. For example, they've introduced, cashless society. So you go into Sainsbury's and you've got AI watching you, and you use your bleep instead of cash, and that supposedly is somehow green or protects your health or something of that nature.
No,
it's a massive investment.
Big Brother mentalities.
Yes.
But no one's saying that's green.
Well, they are saying it's green.
Who's they? Who's they?
I mean,
But
the international agencies, the World Economic Forum.
Oh.
What? The World Economic Forum doesn't exist.
Did I say that?
The World Economic Forum is an international organisation which Keir Starmer said he prefers to Parliament. Okay? Prince Charles is a member of the World Economic Forum. They meet once a year at Davos and they make a minimum programme of what they all agree on. And what they all agree on is that they should transfer resources from your pension funds into a climate fund, and that climate fund will fund what they call the privatisation of nature. The privatisation of nature means they're going to put a price on every animal and plant on Earth, and that price will allow them to commodify nature. And that commodification of nature, these are direct programs, you can check them out yourselves. The commodification of nature is to create a new marketplace for global capitalism. That's the game. It's not what they're claiming it is. It's not to look after the people and protect the environment. It's to defraud the world's population in the name of the green technology and climate change. Nobody is denying that climate changes. The argument is, does man's activity per se cause the climate to change? That's another question. That's what's in dispute. The gentleman says it's not in dispute. Well, I put it to you, it is in dispute. But even if it's not in dispute, nothing we can do here will make any difference. And all we're doing is displacing the same things they're saying are causing the problems to other parts of the world.
I just want to kind of gauge people in terms of time. It's 8:10. I feel like we don't want to be going on forever. Maybe take one more question. But before we do that, I just want to does anybody want to have a very, very quick comeback on this? Are we okay? We'll go forward. Perfect, okay. Anybody else got a question? Please.
Alright, well mine is quite different because I looked at the sheet.
And it's about war as well. Yes,
Yeah.
please.
And then I read the little letters, not the bold ones, and it said climate. And I was like, for a long time I was trying to connect the two. Now I was born in one of the most polluted cities in Europe during the 80s, and then 90s began and we had a war. And to me those two topics cannot be more different. So I started thinking about what would connect them, because I grew up with one of my favorite songs, roughly translated is literally says, let the glaciers come apart, let winds become nervous, let mountains...
What city was this?
Sorry?
What city was it?
Zenica.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in Bosnia.
Okay.
It's actually, pollution is still a bit of an issue. We're still among the top cities that Mittal is now there, and it's I mean, back then we couldn't complain because, well, we had a dictatorship. So any complaints about the industry was seen as being against the country and against the brotherhood. Now we do complain, but now they find different ways. So, for example, I had a meeting with a scientist, and he said, well, you know, the things that measure our pollution, they're actually strategically placed so that they don't pick up the real measurements. So,
We
anyway,
got
that's
Yeah.
and
We do that here too.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's not good because well, yeah. So I started thinking, and this song which literally says like, let glaciers come apart, let rains drown everything as long as there's no war and insanity among people. And then I started thinking, well, wait a minute, maybe these two topics are not so different. And I was trying to connect, what is it about them? And well, one of the first things, obviously, was life and death, because, well, let's face it, the war is all about death, and peace is all about life and living, and it's a lot more complicated. Wars, I guess there are cycles who are into that kind of stuff, because otherwise we wouldn't have wars, but are all about death. And one of the connecting factors that came up very quickly was money, profit maximization, and making it as easy as possible. To this day, I don't understand why and how arms dealers and traders and all these big, they make a lot of money from basically killing. But that's, again, a friend of mine actually said, well, where would China be if it wasn't for our market, meaning the Western market, not just the market around the corner. And greed came up very, very quickly, and I was like, yeah, just because it's cheap doesn't mean we have to make it available. It doesn't have to, because actually cheap products, as we have calculated, are more expensive in the long run. You buy something good quality and that will last. Quality is no longer available in the market. So back in the day,
I like that.
thank you. I know that my grandparents had like and this is what I don't understand about our economy. How is it that my grandparents had a better fridge freezer than I do? And my fridge freezer is very accurately calculated how long it will last. My guarantee is 5 years. 5 years, 1 month, the fridge is broken. How is that possible? My grandparents had a fridge freezer for 30 years. Yeah. And of course they didn't throw out that much because they didn't spend that much. They didn't spend time shopping that much. They didn't see shopping as a therapy, as many of my generation do. And this is all a life change that came with the cheap stuff that we have flooding our market, including water bottles, which, by the way, my grandparents would not have, like plastic water. That for them that was like one of the methods between. Because, I mean, as easy as it is to say Hitler was evil, it's much more important to ask how is it that so many normal Germans followed him and supported him? Because Hitler, could have ended up in an institution, being called a bit of a psycho, and that's it. Instead, Hitler got the support from people. This is where propaganda comes in. And I think this is what we really need to. So I was trying to figure out all these connections.
This is wonderful. What is your question?
Obviously, I have a long list. I could go on and on. But I'd like to ask you, what is your connection between these two topics? Climate and war.
Okay, great question. All right, let's start. Michael, you haven't started. I don't think at any point. So,
Okay.
Franklin, you start.
Well, the thematic I was talking about earlier on, I think is the key to it. For example, we've seen in Ukraine a conflict that is of the 21st century. It's the first major conflict of the 21st century. Well, not the first major conflict of the recent times. And what does it look like? It's like the First World War. It's like the First World War with drones, robots, and the latest technologies being used to slaughter people. Soldiers from the Russian side and the Ukrainian side in trenches, sitting there getting blown up with laser-guided missiles and firing weapons with drones. So there you have the reality of the world we live in. And those people who, on the one side, go to United Nations conferences and talk about climate change are sending weapons of mass destruction to maintain that war. And there is no reason for that war to be continued. And yet they continue to do so. They continue to push it. And I remember the war in Yugoslavia. Many of my friends came from Bosnia who settled in England after that. And at that time, again, it wasn't simply the collapse of the regime in Yugoslavia, which did happen, but it was also the interventions of French, the Americans and others, and Germans, in causing conflicts and driving conflicts inside former Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia had its own problems, but they were exacerbated by the intervention of Western powers. You may remember that that there was a bombing of the Chinese embassy at the time. Deliberate, intentional bombing of the Chinese embassy. They were using an old map, and that's the reason why it happened. And they're preparing at the moment, through the war in Russia, for a war with China. And in fact, China's technology has been developing. They're trying to develop, like the Chinese or not, they're trying to develop independently. They're now not focusing on exports, they're focusing on the internal economy. And their development path has done all the things they could talk about for the green technologies, but in actual fact, they're seen as the competitor. Because they're seen as, rather than us making alliances with Chinese cities, for example, to develop the economy, where people are unemployed, we can have people go to, in China they've got a huge shortage of labour. You can go over, if you're skilled in any sense, you can go to China and get a job straight away. Even just speaking English, you can go and get a job there, teaching English. And so the potential for economic collaboration with China is enormous. And yet instead of that, we're preparing for conflict and war with China. So we have to understand that the world is an integral whole. Everything is interconnected with each other. And therefore, I don't think that's why I said Britain can't make any difference to the climate. Nothing. And therefore, all this stuff about, they'll give you a plastic bottle with a plastic top on it and give you a paper straw. And the paper straw involves growing trees and chopping them down. It's all virtue signalling and it's fraudulent. That's what I'm saying.
Thank you. Kieran.
Yeah, so thank you for that. And I imagine you have a very different perspective. I've actually lived through a war, which I've not lived through a war in my place, thank God. I hope I never have. What is the connection? I mean, I think the connection is getting stronger, will be becoming stronger as we look into the future. The climate is going to cause mass migration of people. We've already seen the impact that migration has had on our politics. We've got one, new political party who seems to be built quite a lot around this issue about immigration and demonising immigrants, which I am not a big fan of on any level. So I think we're going to have a lot of movement of a lot of people over the next 20, 50 years, and that's going to cause in itself a lot of conflict, which worries me, because we've seen what human nature is like. The other thing, you maybe remember, and I looked it up on my phone, the book Guns, Germs and Steel, Jared Diamond. Did you read that? That was a good book. And he was basically going through what caused the collapse of European and North African civilizations. And he summed it up in Guns, Germs and Steel. Anyway, if you haven't read that book, it's a very interesting book.
What is it?
Guns, Germs and Steel. It's a good book. He's written. Yeah. Anyway, so we have an issue with resources. That's for sure. We're just talking about electric cars, and there's not enough resources. I mean, until we come up with new technology that doesn't need those very rare minerals in the quantities it needs, that's going to be a resource. In fact, it's already happening in Africa with China. That's why China's investing so much in Africa right now, because it knows where the resources are. So that's going to be a problem. We are heading down we all know we're in interesting times right now, let's be honest. And while I always want to steer clear of drawing connections to Adolf Hitler, it's never a good place to go, let's be honest. There's some resonance, I feel, of what's happening now, and populism and dangerous things happening. And populists who came into power democratically, never ever forget that. Trump came into power democratically and tried to overthrow Congress, and is saying that, God knows what he's saying today. He's got a chance of getting back in again. Putin is not a nice person. I think we can all agree on that. I don't know what the political party's views are,
but I think it's a dangerous place as well. So, what's the connection? I think climate is going to be a much greater cause of conflict and wars going into the future, and that's why we really need to get a handle on it, and at least some global appreciation and understanding of what to do about it in order to reduce people's lives, generations of people's lives get utterly destroyed by war, and we always tend to forget that.
Thank you. Good.
I work as a part of a refugee group, so we've been over to Calais quite a lot, taking food, whatever is needed. So I've seen quite a lot of refugees and people who have had war, and I was there, I chatted to literally hundreds of people, and the stories are always horrible, always grim beyond words. There is a huge link between that and climate. The people who are most, we have most refugees here at present, are from Afghanistan. What is that? Afghanistan is the #1 affected country by climate change. Now, that's not the only thing, it's obviously. There's the Taliban. And one of the things that I saw in Calais was young boys who, and they would lift up their shirts and show me sort of scars, and I literally had no idea what it was. There were quite a few that did it, and it was sort of, it meant nothing to me until I spoke to someone from Afghanistan over here, and she told me a terrible story that what happens is when people from Afghanistan leave, you have to leave without papers, because if you don't, then the Taliban at the borders will trace you back to your family in your village, and they will go and kill your parents, or they will go and exact revenge. So they say, I don't know where they are, blah, blah, blah. And that's the way, and of course it gets phrased as, all these migrants, haven't got any papers. Well, no, they haven't. Quite a lot of that. So there is a massive overlap. There's a lot of places badly affected by climate. There's also wars, and there's a lot of people. I remember meeting a guy from Chad, and he was saying that, this is deeply imprinted on my mind. We were chatting away, and I asked him what he was doing there in Calais, and he said, well, nothing grows, nothing has grown for the last 10 years, nothing will grow. What am I supposed to do? He was a climate refugee. He didn't know he was a climate refugee. There's no such thing as a climate refugee according to the UN. But there he was, and I was chatting to him. So all these things, they sort of come together like that. And some of the stuff that you say about resources is very true. Wars are about resources, quite a lot of them. And whether that actually happens through war or economic measures, I think it happens more economically. That China bought up lots of bits, they bought up lots of Brazil, and they're using that. But it's about resources. Right at the beginning of neoliberalism, you had Allende, who was, Allende in Chile, who was... Allende, who was...
Sorry, just aware of the time. We've got to be out of this room in 5 minutes. So this is a bit of a challenge. So what I think, it's been amazing, I really let you talk. But what we're going to need now, I think, is a massively quick wrap up from everybody. So I'm really sorry to stop you, because we literally booked the room for 2 hours, and it's been so fascinating. I just sort of let it go and let it go. So can we just have a 1 minute each? Obviously, this will be recorded, it's not going to be on the website, people can see it, which is important. So sorry to stop you.
No, that's fine.
But I'll tell you what, the 1 minute can start with you, then you can finish in your 1 minute if you like. So 1 minute from you.
Okay. For me, in terms of if you want to have a habitable planet for your children and for your grandchildren, you have to vote for them. Voting for climate denial parties, funded by oil and gas, although he's left now, and dark money will not achieve that. If you want a safer world, not one where corporations and government are ever more indistinguishable, you have to vote for anti-science parties. I don't vote for anti-science parties, if you want to see a world where inequality is tackled, excess wealth taxed, vote for them. If you want to see practical solutions put into action by experts, you have to vote for them. If you want to see the serious issues, climate and ecological breakdown, dealt with, you need someone whose expertise and focus is on them. So be in no doubt, climate change, the climate and ecological breakdown is happening and accelerating. Chatham House said that 11 degrees centigrade was possible. The world's premier climate scientist, James Hansen, has warned that there is 10 degrees centigrade.
I'm afraid.
So I'm just going to start with one thing. I'll leave you with a quote from Keynes. If we can do it, we can afford it. We cannot afford not to. So I would choose love, I would vote for Fergal. Not me, don't vote for me. Vote for Fergal, vote for me.
Thank you. Kieran.
Sure, so I'll try and squeeze in. Here's the reasons that you shouldn't vote Conservative and Labour, and you should vote Lib Dem on these issues we've been talking about nationally, globally, and then I'll throw a couple of local Putney things if that's right. The Conservative got Gaza horribly wrong. We can dig in, well we can't dig, we don't have time to dig into the reasons why. And they've had terrible green policies, just terrible green policies, and we've had it for a very long time, and that's why we're behind. Labour, again, they're going to be in the majority, and last time we had it, we had the Iraq War, and we all knew where that came from and why, and that was a terrible situation. And they've already scaled back their green promises. The Lib Dems have been correct on Gaza from day one, ceasefire, bilateral ceasefire. They were correct on Iraq from day one. It's because they come from a different place, a different mindset that I don't have time to talk about. The local issues, getting that bridge open, and I really need to, at some point, someone needs to give me 5 minutes to explain how I can actually do it in a year and not like take 5 years or maybe it'll be another 5 years. Electric buses, you know, how terrible the pollution is. You know, if I have to tear out the diesel, you know, tanks out of those buses myself, I will do. Let's get some, every bus needs to be electric and cut down the air pollution.
Thank you, Kieran. Heiko, sorry, 1 minute.
I believe that the largest capitalist companies in Britain and in the world are in direct contradiction to the interests of humanity and of the people in this country. They, unfortunately, control the governments, they control the economic agendas being discussed, and the economic science, as I pointed out, should be the one that they know most about, because it's something that we all are engaged in. But it's the thing that they call it the bad science, you know, the one they don't know anything about. And then they claim on other fields to know everything about it. They control the military, and the huge military-industrial complex that's engaged in war and warfare across the world. They control Big Pharma and all the programs. By the way, 25% of deaths in Britain are attributed to misprescribing or misuse of pharmaceuticals. 25% of the deaths in Britain. And they also, unfortunately, control the whole discussion about climate and the future of technology. And in 1989, I lived in East Germany, and I was involved with people involved in the opposition movement in East Germany, arguing for a different type of socialism, democratic we lost. But I remember one of the leading figures there, Uwe Bastian, we discussed what the future would be and what our type of slogan should be, and I've stuck with this slogan. I believe in peace, freedom and plenty in harmony with the ecology.
Thank you. Very much for coming. Please check the website for further hustings because we're going to be cancelling some. Because it will be, we'll tell you ASAP. Simply because because, well, there's a few reasons. I think people have got lots to do, people are getting a little bit tired, and also Labour hasn't come to any of them, and they become less viable if we don't have Labour coming to them. And I've done everything in my power. If you can get Fleur to come.
Try and get her to respond to an email.
I have. I mean, well, yes, exactly. I mean, it's taken emails.
Your
emails,
MP
phone
is not
calls.
the best MP, I hate to break it to you.
Do you want me to give her a review?
Could you?
Please have a different email address because the MP's parliamentary email addresses aren't.
It still gets tracked, yes, she does have to respond to. Yes, she's not coming because she doesn't want us questioning her about all the issues that she doesn't want to.
Yeah, I mean, it's a much freer debate. I mean, there've been other hustings, and I've been to 2 of them. One of them was in Southfields, and half of the questions came from the audience, half of the questions were already, they were pre. And in St Mary's, they were all pre-sent in. And it just didn't give us much time for the audience to ask questions. So I'm trying to have the balance of allowing people to talk, allowing everyone to talk, and, you know, giving people a chance to also answer fully and not feel so, oh my God, I've got 1 minute to answer, and then next question. You know, to try to have some debate going. And that was the purpose of these. And there seems to be kind of a slight kind of rumour going around from Labour that there's some other motive. The motive is this, you coming. And exactly, and as you can see, I am anal about everyone getting the same opportunity to speak.
You don't expect us to come to all of them, but at least a couple of them.
Yeah, so exactly. So please check the website, because I don't want anyone going to want to find out so. Okay. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you as well. Poor blimey, that was a lot, wasn't it? Yeah. Thank you.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah.